Hey, welcome everyone. This is the first in our series of coffee chats about the role and value of women's innovation and entrepreneurship. Dal serves as the Atlantic Region hub of the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, and we're really pleased and excited to be hosting these panels in collaboration with our partners at Memorial University of Newfoundland and Labrador. And I'm going to get a chance to say thank you to all of our panelists in a minute and introduce them to you. But before I do that, let me say that I'm pleased to open these panels in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, and we're looking forward to exploring how we might strengthen women's engagement in the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems across settler and Indigenous communities in Atlantic Canada, amongst a number of other topics today. But we've only got 30 minutes, so let's dive in and get started. I'll ask each panelist to begin by introducing herself, and maybe let's start with you, Janine.
Hi, thanks, Kim. I'm Janine Fraser. I'm the Director General of Operations for ACOA Nova Scotia. So I'm responsible for the programming that happens on two sides of the shop at ACOA. We have loans to businesses, and we also have a communities inclusive growth. And so both of those parts of our mandate report up to me, and we take an inclusive growth lens to both of them. So that's partly what brings me here today, I guess. I'd also say I started my career and my training, my education is in social policy, and I started my career in the province of Ontario working on child poverty issues and on issues for people with disabilities. And over the course of time, I segued into economic policy, but to me, these things are very interlinked, and we can certainly see that to be true when we're talking about women and women entrepreneurship.
Awesome. Welcome, Janine. Alex.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. I'm Alex McCann. I'm the Executive Director of ONSIDE. We are a not-for-profit organization based here in Nova Scotia, and we have a vision for a prosperous Nova Scotia driven by inclusive, innovation-driven entrepreneurship. And we're also trying to build a broader community around this kind of innovation across Atlantic Canada and throughout Canada. We leverage a collective impact framework, and we try to mobilize disruptive ideas, some of which come from other parts of the world, including MIT at their Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program. And we believe that by sharing and growing these ideas here in our region, that we'll be able to empower others to mobilize action around accelerating inclusive growth. So I'm super happy to be here and to be part of the panel.
Awesome. Nice to have you, Alex. All right, Cathy, over to you.
Well, thanks, Kim. It's great to be here. I'm Cathy Bennett from St. John's, Newfoundland. I'm the founder and co-managing partner with Sandpiper Ventures, amongst other things. I've had an extensive career in business leadership, had about 30 years, including growing my own company that included companies operating in 7 different sectors. I've served on, I believe I counted almost a half a dozen boards, including crown corporations and publicly traded companies, focusing on everything from manufacturing to industrial construction, technology, and business services. I chair the board of a tech startup that's quite successful in Atlantic Canada under the name of Kraken Robotics. Really excited to be part of the conversation here because my volunteer efforts are really focused around how we can continue to activate, encourage, support women to become entrepreneurs, and excited about the work that I do with SheEO, which is a unique way of funding women who want to start innovative companies, and also excited for this conversation. So thanks to both Dalhousie Memorial University, Kim and Isabel, for hosting us.
It's already over where you are, Cathy. All right. And last but definitely not least, Shelley.
Atilihay, Shelley Obunga Inubunga, a Labrador Miyut. So I'm an Inuk woman born in Labrador, but I've grown up the vast majority of my life in Mi'kma'ki. And I am an assistant professor at St. Francis Xavier University in the Department of Management. I have a passion for education and knowledge acquisition. I have a deep respect for cultural, traditional, and spiritual connections to land and That's central to a lot of the research that I do. The vast majority of research that I do is in Indigenous storytelling towards sustainable development, community well-being, and responsible management. I also work in gender and diversity. And that gives me a lot of opportunities to work with Indigenous women who are leading grassroots initiatives and helping them to share their stories and their voices towards respect, resilience, and compassion. I strive to incorporate Indigenous knowledges and Indigenous and BIPOC women's voices into the business process, especially when leading in economic, social, and cultural, and environmental and spiritual well-being. So social innovation and sustainable innovation on a local and global scale.
All right, this is already awesome. So you can see why we thought it would be so neat to bring the four of you together into this conversation, and let me not let another moment slide by without digging in. So let's get us started. Cathy, I'm giving you a heads up. I'm going to put you on the spot first. How can we better collaborate among the Atlantic provinces to support women entrepreneurs and founders?
Well, I mean, I think there's exciting things that are happening now throughout the region. And I want to give a big shout out to Janine with ACOA. I mean, I'm a big believer in financial inclusion, and it's really difficult to be an entrepreneur if you can't actually get the capital that you need to get started, whether it's a small microloan or whether it's, a significant amount of support. And I think what we're seeing in Atlantic Canada is a bit of a retraction from access to capital. And that's why organizations like ACOA or Sandpiper Ventures or SheetEO have to kind of step up. And I think in Atlantic Canada, we're such a small group, we have to share all those resources collaboratively throughout the region.
Thanks, Cathy. Janine.
Sure. I'll hop in here. I guess what I'd start by saying is ACOA is delivering on behalf of the Government of Canada, as the other RDAs, a women's entrepreneurship strategy, and it was motivated by simple numbers, which are at a national level, 16% of SMEs are owned by, or majority owned by, women. 10% of high growth firms are owned by women, and 8% of women-led firms export. And we know firms need to export to grow. And so what I think is really interesting around the Government of Canada approach right now that we saw through the Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy is it's very deliberate and it's very targeted. And so we're seeing government take this sort of a three-pillared approach, which is one, the access to capital that Cathy's talking about. And we use our programs normally to do that as well and are targeting women. But this was a very targeted approach to identifying women, diverse women in particular, but also women in growth companies and providing contributions directly into those companies. The second piece was through ecosystem, which is what we're here, I think, about today, around how do we get our ecosystem partners to work better and to be more effective. And so here in Atlantic Canada, we did focus on creating programs that really were targeted to women. That's what women want. They want programs that are targeted to their needs and very specifically around what their growth needs are. And then thirdly, this panel is the example of the development of knowledge hubs and bringing baseline knowledge to the challenge, to the issue, understanding where we're starting as a country in terms of women entrepreneurship, but also building that knowledge and building expertise and then disseminating it. And I know that's partly what this panel is about today. So those are kind of the three elements. And we're seeing that approach taken as well in terms of building Black entrepreneurship as well. So I think it's worth noting that it's targeted and it's very deliberate. And I think those deliberate actions are ones that we really need to get comfortable with.
All right, I heard a lot in there to keep going on, but let me toss it over so we get everybody's voices around the table, and I'll ask Shelley and then maybe Alex to jump in.
I just want to give a shout out to organizations like Ulnueg and Jedi, who are really doing some fabulous work in development and financing microloans and supporting marketing plans and supporting initiatives by entrepreneurs and really celebrating those achievements in fabulous ways. So just wanted to make mention of those organizations that are also offering some really fabulous support.
Yeah, and I'll add to the mix. I'm going to maybe take it in a slightly different direction. It might be a bit like holistic. So some of the work that we do at ONSIDE is that we try to leverage some collective impact principles, and I think many of the things that Janine and Cathy and I think Shelley sort of touched upon, have some basis in that. And a lot of times in collective impact, there are many organizations that are doing lots of different things that are really great. But solving what's happening here with women in entrepreneurship is so complicated and so complex, and there's so many great things going on, but sometimes it gets kind of complicated. And I think that here in our region, we have a lot of great leaders that are starting to step up, and people are starting to really develop some programs and knowledge around what needs to happen. And from a collective impact sort of standpoint, usually what I'm looking at is like, where is the energy? Who's standing up? Who's moving forward? And you can't do everything, but I think people can kind of find points of alignment and get together to sort of move that needle forward. And another thing I think that's really important that I see here with the wonderful women around the table is the power to amplify the things that are going on. So ONSIDE, we're a small organization. We do a lot of work focused in rural areas with Black identified people and women, and just trying to make some headway in with the Indigenous community as well. But we can't do everything, and it's really important to amplify the great things that are doing. So whether it's amplifying some of the work that Sandpiper is doing or other groups, it doesn't mean that ONSIDE has to do it, but I can definitely be a supporter and be shouting from the rooftops about the great things that are being done. So just wanted to add that little piece there.
Yeah, I really love that, Alex. That so kind of characterizes, I think, my experience of stepping in at the Faculty of Management and seeing how much more we can do when we're closely connected and trying to amplify each other's messages and work together in this space. We're not that big, right? As kind of Cathy says at the beginning, we should be able to do a lot together. All right, let me ask another question. This is a hopeful one. So what gives you optimism about what we can do in the Atlantic region? And Janine, I'll start by putting you on the spot first.
Sure. So I have a couple things. First of all, I think it's fabulous that right now our key incubators and accelerators are led by women. So we have a women CEO at Volta, at Cove, at Genesis, at Propel, and at Startup Zone and PEI. So to me, I think that changes the conversation a little bit. And the second thing I would say is I see women taking risk now, and I will point to Sandpiper. And, that was a bunch of women that stood up and took a risk and really worked hard to build a VC that was targeting women and diverse women. And that's not easy in Atlantic Canada. It's not easy in Canada. And so I think even the energy and the network that, and the new energy and new network that brought into the ecosystem, I think actually is quite profound, and we'll probably look back and see this as a bit of a turning point for women entrepreneurship in Atlantic Canada because of that.
I'm gonna pass it to Shelley, but Cathy, I'm gonna send a lob your way to say I'd love to see you jump in a little bit and share a bit about what that experience was like for you. So while you think about that, over to Shelley.
I was actually going to go on to a bit of a different slant on this, so forgive me for maybe diverting too far, but my optimism really comes from the approach to gender-based analyses and GBA plus approaches to recognizing that there's an intersectional approach to understanding women's positions in business and entrepreneurship, and that we're looking as well at 2S LGBTQIA plus peoples, and really looking at ourselves as in solidarity amongst all women and queer folks. So this is something that I think is a really optimistic aspect of where we're heading and what we're doing. But also I really wanted to kind of, again, bring a highlight to something really fun, because it's innovative and socially innovative. But artists are doing some amazing work in social innovation and sustainable innovation, creating art, selling art that has a social, political, and an environmental focus. So, for instance, I'm working with this amazing Collective 2030 of BIPOC folk who are engaging in the Mayworks program, and all of their art has a climate just futures focus. And these types of innovative ideas and social innovation ideas are just absolutely brilliant. And I think that they need to be recognized. And also some really strong grassroots work coming from Indigenous women and 2S LGBTQIA plus peoples, and it's really, really inspirational to see this work happening.
Cool. Shelley, that's a great, I mean, it ties into a fascinating conversation. I think we had a community conversation in the Faculty of Management around decolonizing the education platform. And we got in this really cool conversation about the intersection of art and what we know and what it means to be business, and how we support businesses that are artists, and how that changes what we think we need in terms of fundamental skills. It was very, very groovy and sort of connected to what you're saying. So Cathy, I'm going to take you back. I'm going to rewind slightly from art to sort of starting up the VC. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about capture the kind of optimism that Janine saw in that initiative.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we felt there was 9 of us that came together to form Sandpiper Ventures and the Atlantic Women's Venture Fund, which is the not-for-profit arm of the venture fund, which is, I think, going to be equally as impactful as the venture fund. We came together with a purpose, and the purpose was we wanted to put our capital behind women entrepreneurs. I had seen it from CEO how essential it is that women have access to capital. Many of my colleagues have seen it from different vantage points. So we enthusiastically planned. We hit the ground running as soon as the pandemic started, because that's obviously the best time to launch a venture fund. And, it's been an interesting year. But I will say that, we have so much empathy for our founders now who are starting new enterprises, because just like we started a very unusual thing in Atlantic Canada, it's a tiny fund, $20 million compared to, national standards, which meant that all kinds of, challenges presented itself. The community has wrapped around us, whether it's local investors, whether it's, organizations that support us and amplify us, like Alex talked about, and, Janine and her team. There's lots of support for what we're doing because it's such a purposeful and focused effort. But to answer the question, if I can, Kim, too, on what gives me optimism, I talked about the pandemic being the start off for Sandpiper. I really think that the pandemic has been a secret little bit of progress in Atlantic Canada. I mean, the amount of collaboration that I've been part of in the last 12 months by virtually connecting with women throughout Atlantic Canada has been unprecedented. And I hope we all do not turn off our Zoom or our StreamYard when the pandemic is over, when the vaccines take hold, because the power of us working collectively in the region has manifested itself in some amazing women connecting. And whether it's investors, whether it's artists, as Shelley talked about, people connecting in a way that they'd never been able to connect because of geography is to our disadvantage sometimes in the region.
Cathy, but can we take a pause and then maybe meet in like Charlottetown and come up with some kind of declaration or something like that?
I think we definitely want to keep everything social together and everything work frequently as much as we can on video, so it's inclusive. We leave too many people behind in rural Canada and rural Atlantic Canada, and technology is a real way for us to stay committed to that inclusiveness. And I'm going to champion that anywhere I can.
Yeah. What a great segue to Alex. It's like you designed it that way. So let me pass it to you, Alex.
Gosh, now listening to you guys, I have so many more things to be optimistic about. So today we had a session where we released our Inclusive Innovation Monitor for Nova Scotia, and there were some really interesting things that came out in the monitor. One didn't seem that great. Which was that we now have about 14% of all startups have, or companies in Nova Scotia have a female CEO. So that doesn't sound like a big number, but it's an improving number. And we have more startups that are happening over the last 3-4 years, and more investment is going into women-led companies because of groups like Sandpiper and others, and folks like at ACOA helping to make a difference. So I'm very optimistic about that, but we need to have more. And I just have this sense that we're kind of headed in the right direction. And I do think that even though COVID in some ways has been really terrible, I think in the last year with different social movements coming to the forefront, whether it's Black Lives Matter or Me Too, or the death of George Floyd, more people are talking about what it means to be inclusive in our economy, in our entrepreneurship. And so I think just the fact that we're even here today talking about this is making me feel optimistic that we're going to be making more progress now than we have in the past. This is mainstream conversation. It's not sideline conversation.
All right, let me shift you from the what excites you to the what just makes you feel, infuriated that we need to change. And so what has to be changed to make sure that we have a more robust ecosystem that supports women's success? Cathy, you're kind of rocking almost. So let me start with you.
Well, I think there's been an amazing infrastructure built in Atlantic Canada to support women entrepreneurs. And I think, Janine talked about the federal government's approach, for example, where it's very purposeful and it's very targeted. I think, we have to encourage the ecosystem members and the stakeholders and those sitting on the sidelines and watching to really operate with purpose for an outcome that we need. I think, what we see is varying levels of appreciation for the challenges that women and underrepresented people have to get into entrepreneurship. And we need to continue to, calibrate that, but also expect everybody to operate, inside that new reality. The other thing I'd throw out to the universities, if I could throw out a challenge, there's some pretty important public policy around tax credits and access to capital, mandates for financial institutions, et cetera. And it sure would be important for that Atlantic, or what I like to say rural lens to be put on that advocacy when public policy officers are looking at making changes. It can make a big, big difference. If women don't have capital, if they don't have something that they can borrow against, they typically can't get access to capital. And if you want wealth to grow in the area where women are, we have to make sure that our policy and our financial mechanisms can support that new entrant.
Tax is my main research area, so Cathy knows she's singing to me when she says that. You know what I mean? All right, Shelley, leap in.
I'm shouting out to the universities as well. There's a really important initiative that needs to happen to create safe spaces and positive spaces for diverse women to participate in the education system. And, we know that women are participating in the education system. That's not the issue. But what we don't necessarily recognize is that the universities are still not a safe place for diverse women, and still there is a rape culture on university campuses. So we need to create safer education spaces for women, and because that is the access to employment, and that is the entry point to being able to grow and build these wonderful and amazing, innovative entrepreneurial ventures. And some of that also has to do with the social determinants of health. We go bigger there with systemic racism. This is a societal issue on a large scale. When we think about the fact that there are 4% of women are Indigenous, and 38% of the prison population for women is Indigenous women. There's a systemic issue there where we need to be able to offer greater support from an employment perspective and an educational perspective to be able to support diverse women in ways that we aren't yet doing. So how do we as women support our fellow women?
That's awesome, Shelley. I'm going to use your thread and pull it back to Janine, because I think, you kind of articulated it in the context of universities, and she started there in the context of the story she told about how her career had unfolded, right? We can start with something like economic innovation or entrepreneurship, and it doesn't take very long before we tie back to all of the fundamental things people need to be able to be creative and bring productive ideas into the economic sphere, right? So Janine, let me turn it to you. What's frustrating? What needs to change?
Sorry, Kim, did you just call on me?
I did, yeah, exactly.
Okay, the audio went a little funny for me.
Okay, I think it's that I said I teach tax, and that just makes everybody
Okay, I just
quiet.
want to add one.
Jump in. We hear you, no
the
problem.
audio went a little funny. I just actually will build on what Shelley was saying, and it's simply that over COVID, the issue of childcare became huge. And when I saw the announcement in the last budget, who knows how that will roll out with the provinces? There's lots of, I'm sure, wrangling there to be had, but childcare is a huge determinant, I think, to women being able to pursue entrepreneurial dreams.
Alex.
Yeah, I was going to go down that pathway as well. We're hearing about the She session, that women's employment, women's interest in being an entrepreneur, doing all of these kinds of things, just even a normal job, has suddenly become much more difficult, and the burdens of being a mom or a caregiver or something like that. You probably see people going behind me. Those are my kids, because the challenge is real and my kids are a bit older. So I do think that some barriers, so whether it's at our tech incubators, and we need to have a place where people can bring their kids. I was at a conference a couple of years ago. We had this report here, the Ivany report, and one of the commissioners came up. She just recently had a baby. I saw her at the back of the room, and I was wondering who this woman was with this baby. She put the baby on the breast for a minute or two, passed the baby over to somebody else, walked up on stage, and continued on with her speech. That doesn't happen every day. And I was just so impressed that she just said, I have important things to do. I'm a mom. I have a kid. I'm going to try to figure out how to make it work. Now, not everybody can do that, but I just think, creating a situation where there are more women who can do the things that they need to and be in a welcoming environment. I think that's definitely something that we need to see more of, because we're going backwards. We're not going forward right now. There are some people who are, and I think a lot of the groups around the table are kind of keeping things steady, but we'll have it hasn't hit us yet, but we'll see a steady slide backwards if we don't put some of these systems in place to help women today.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had a fair amount of conversation so far around how we make sure we create an environment where the doors are open and the building is being constructed by everyone together. So let me just ask squarely on the question about making sure that all the players get involved in building what we know is so vital as an innovation driven economy. Who do we need to keep the doors open for? What's missing? What kinds of things should we be attentive to? And this is our last question. So if you've got a final thing you just need to say, even if it's a bit disconnected from that, let me invite you to jump in. So who could I let jump in first?
I'm happy to go first.
Okay, go, Cathy.
No problem. I think what we need to continue to challenge ourselves is what I like to say is creatively copy and mimic. Right? There's lots of amazing things that are happening around the world in support of women's entrepreneurship. And, I'll throw out a challenge now. I'm sure that we can mimic or copy a coding program that takes women who are incarcerated, puts them through a micro-credentialing opportunity, and then connects them to, if they choose this as an opportunity, to a coding job in the world of growing technology. This is a hugely successful program in one of the US states. And those are the types of things I think that we need to continue to challenge ourselves to figure out, as Alex always reminds me when I talk to her, is, follow the energy. So if you can find a problem that we can coalesce around and we can solve it, every problem we solve is one we don't have to deal with tomorrow. And it helps to ensure that women have those opportunities that we know they desperately are going to need coming out of the pandemic.
Awesome, thanks. Shelley.
I really think that we need to find ways in order to help women tell their stories and celebrate together. I think that coming together virtually and or in person when we can, there are great opportunities to really have sharing and idea sharing and experience sharing. And those can create some amazing connections and perhaps even opportunities for partnerships. And that strengthens any network. And so I'm hoping to see lots and lots of storytelling and celebrations. And that's where I'll end my chat.
Thanks, Shelley. Janine.
I feel like folks have covered it. I think Cathy's comment around there's some policy questions to be had here. There's some government issues that need to be addressed around encouraging investment in businesses, encouraging people to invest in diverse businesses. To me, that's probably I think is a big next step, and something I think we need to see some leadership on.
It's a great teaser, Janine, because in one of our next panels, we're going to talk about what's the connection with government. How does government make a difference in this space? So stay tuned. And Alex, we'll pass to you for the final word.
Yeah, I really appreciate the conversation here today. I think that what we're trying to really understand as we try to, create a innovation-driven, entrepreneurial, culture in this neck of the woods, is really asking ourselves who's participating in what's happening, who's at the table to make decisions, who's benefiting from all of this innovation and entrepreneurship. Is the future evenly distributed? I think we know that it is not. So I think that we really are starting to know, and it's coming into the mainstream of conversation, that women, BIPOC individuals, people who live in rural communities don't have the same level of access to opportunities to participate in an innovation economy. And I think that we know that now, and I think it's up to all of us to really step into where we can to make a difference. And for us, I think we're taking that first step today. So I'm pleased about that, but I know we have much more work to do.
Awesome. Alex, I even hate to say anything after that last part because it was just such a beautiful wrap up. So let me thank the panelists. It really has been a joy. I knew it would be a joy, and it's turned out to be a joy to get to spend some time with you. I'm so grateful for all of the hard work each of you are doing to make the Atlantic regions a much more exciting, vibrant, and inclusive place to do this kind of work. So let me end on a thank you to you. And of course, as always, a thank you to the backstage crew that makes these recordings possible. Have a great afternoon.